Hello. Back here are new things you don't have to worry about. We used to have to archive a lot of stuff. Tell you how that used to go. It's kind of fun. Used to work for the United States government, usually the military, and there was all kinds of rules. These are very antiquated rules, so you're keeping rules that really probably aren't very relevant, and you used to have to apply them to a lot of things that it doesn't really matter that you applied them to, just because it might be useful at some point in the future. Um, we used to have to save everything to tape, and you'd have to save it for 20, 25, 30 years. I dealt with something called PKI, the public key infrastructure. It does a lot for authentication, and you would, and these are the things that if you use stuff like Blackboard, what you do, if you use stuff like the portal here at Eastern Mexico University, you're working a little bit with public key infrastructure. A lot of you who work for the military here, because Eastern's right next to a military base at Cannon, you get these little CAT cards. I actually have one of my old CAT cards that I never turned back in. I'm probably going to go to jail for it, but that's life. And it doesn't work anymore. And trust me, they'll scan it and they'll go, "You're not allowed to be here." So it's like, cool. It's like, all right, well, I won't try that again because I think it's a federal offense to even attempt to use a bad CAT card. Anyway, it has a chip in it and stuff, and that goes out and gets checked against a large list to see if you're allowed to have access to this resource, this computing resource, for instance. And we would archive all that information. And guess what? It's not terribly useful. After a couple of years, it's not useful, except if you want to know if somebody tried to get access to something. There's so many people trying to get access to stuff all the time. It really kind of becomes worthless. It's like, I don't care that he logged into the computer system 5 times. And it was at this time. At some point, it becomes just a wash of just garbage. But the interesting thing now is because we have so much storage capacity, because we don't have to predetermine what our purposes are before we collect information. We can just collect a lot of information and try to make sense of it later on some point. We don't even bother. Archiving has can essentially kind of disappear because we can get almost instantaneous information about everything. We still don't do that. We still archive like mad. I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction to things. Still cheaper to back up things to tape and go store them somewhere. And knowing that you'll probably never ask for this stuff again, but you want to have it just in case. And it's true, I suppose. There might be something horrible that happens. But we found out that usually life works so fast, it really doesn't matter. Anyway, and that's the big thing about big data. You don't know what you're going to do with it before you store it. You just store it, and you store everything, and then you try to figure out some way to get it out later. The old relational database way, or the current relational database way, if you're into that, you have to really know what you're after before you do it, because you're not going to store information unless it's in some kind of a matrix. The only problem is once you do it that way, it really is tied to the original idea of why you were getting this information in the first place. And if you forget that, you don't know where it is. It's just an isolated chunk of data. It's actually, if you're a security-minded person, it's an excellent way to make sure that any particular piece of data is less useful than you think. Having things spread out among different tables, if we could isolate each table, that would be incredibly secure. because you'd only have little itty bitty bits of pieces. You could string it all together, but it would take a lot of time to get the individual pieces and to get the individual tables and string them together. With big data, you don't do that. You keep it all in chunks. If it's a document-centric database, what's a good name for it? CouchDB, which I've been looking at. It's kind of cool. And I'm like, ooh, how can I use this? And I find myself having to flush out the old relational database paradigm, which I got pretty good at. And but I'm still good enough that I can get rid of that stuff. So we end up having, we end up being able to store everything we want to without having a real reason before. If you think of it kind of like YouTube, it's all those kiddie videos. Or Facebook's the worst for keeping tons and tons and tons of old crap. Thank goodness most of their stuff has an age on it, and it just ages out after a while, and it's not really terribly publicly accessible because it's supposed to be so fluid. It's always about what's coming up next. Anyway, so all those kiddie videos, I guess they're stored somewhere. We don't know how useful they are. Maybe we can destroy the universe with kitty cat videos. Some outfit like Anonymous is going to take us all over because they nailed us to the corner with their kitty cat videos. We can find value later as things get cheaper and faster, which is really the great paradigm, and it's amazing. It allows amazing capability, like this whole thing of you don't really need to archive anymore. You can have all the data right there. You don't have to worry about when am I going to shuffle this off to something? When does something become so old that it's not useful anymore? And you go, I don't have to even think about that. Who cares? Let's just add another hard drive. Let's just add some more storage capacity. In the end, you're still paying for it on some level. So you really do want to make a cost-benefit analysis. But because it's so cheap and so fast, sometimes it's not even worthwhile to really think about it. It's like how much money you have to throw at your electric utility. You don't kill yourself trying to recover costs that you've already spent on old electricity. It's gone. You can't really do anything with it. So you might not even want to consider that because it's kind of a silly thing to consider. I had that thing at the bottom. It may work, but doesn't help. It's from the whole standpoint of you get all this flood of information, but is it really useful to you? Are you ever going to use it? And you go, you know what? You never know. And you never know when some entity like the government's going to come back and say, we need to have your information from 5 years ago about this, this, and this. We're carrying on some investigation of somebody who worked at your company, and we need that information. We need it right now. And you go, oh my gosh, we got to stop everything, go and do what the government tells us to do, which is a little obnoxious, but you know what? These things happen. And you'll need to produce that information. It's really the fun thing. Like we were talking about just a little while ago about the recent Equifax break-ins. And you go, why did they have so much information? Why was it? How come they were even keeping it? And you go, because at some point the government was going to come and demand it of them. If they didn't have it, they would get into big trouble. So it's always this big thing. It's better to hang on to it just in case than it is to ever get rid of it. So and it may not be worthwhile to even think about archiving stuff because that takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. Somebody has to do that. That costs money too. And getting it all set up costs a lot of money. Setup is always the most expensive part of anything. So sometimes it's just easier to say, nope, we just got a big, huge database. It just gets bigger, 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 and bigger. Oh my gosh. And it's just sometimes easier just to keep up that big old, huge, monstrous thing and to keep paying that bill because you just never know when it's going to come, when something back there in the back is going to come due and make your life miserable. So it's okay. That's something you don't have to worry about anymore. The cost of keeping your data right there and accessible is falling. And so you might not even worry too much about it the other way. Database solutions or backup solutions are incredibly expensive. And they're not going down in cost. Kind of funny. I don't understand that. Talk to you later. Bye.